All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining in our first American Marketing Association Collegiate Conversation event. This is the first of what will be a three-part series this spring to help to inform and educate our collegiate audience and others who are interested on some hot topics in marketing. And this is sponsored, of course, by the American Marketing Association's Pittsburgh chapter, as well as the Roland School of Business at Point Park University. Next slide, please.
Sure.
We do have several upcoming events that we wanted to make sure you were aware of. Of course, all of this information can be found at www.amapittsburgh.org. We have a networking event, Coffee Connections, coming up tomorrow. So get up bright and early and join in, network, and engage with your fellow marketers. There is also a Level Up event coming up this week, and the focus there is on the virtual revolution. There is also a Super Bowl ad review where you'll be able to vote for your favorite ads and hear them deconstructed by the experts. Again, you can register for any of these events at the website www.amapittsburgh.org. Our Collegiate Conversation series continues in both March and April. So you can register now for the March session, which will focus on digital marketing analytics. Our April session will focus on sales and marketing alignment. And then for those of you who are interested in learning more about SEO, there is a boot camp coming up on May 27th. And one of our panelists today, Jesse Witham, will be involved in that as well. So again, go to the website and you can get registered now. Well, I'm excited that we have some expert panelists with us today to talk about digital marketing and SEO. So let's get started getting to know a little bit more about each of them. Jamie Orlando, the Director of Marketing and Sales for Butler Technologies, is with us. He is also currently the president of AMA Pittsburgh. So Jamie, can you tell us a little bit about your role at Butler Technologies and your career journey, how you ended up to hold that particular position?
Sure. Well, thanks for the introduction. Believe it or not, I am not a classically trained marketer. I went to school. I have a couple of engineering degrees and a project management degree. So I worked for a German company for a number of years doing project management and left in 2014 to start my own business. And through that, I learned some of the marketing techniques necessary to run a business, local area marketing, SEO, and I came on here to Butler Technologies in 2017 to help lead their marketing department. Was able to help grow the business and generate sales, which is exactly what you want to do with marketing, and eventually moved into the role where I'm managing both the marketing and the sales side. So I have a little bit of both sides, the dark and the light side, if you will. But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for being willing to share your time and your knowledge with us today, Jamie. We also have Jesse Witham, who is president of searchmarketingagency.com. So Jesse, can you tell us a little bit about your role in your career journey?
Yeah, thanks for having me on the panel, Doreen. So I've been doing SEO my entire career, actually, close to 20 years. I started learning SEO when I was building websites back in high school, and just really never stopped down that journey. And I started Search Marketing Agency as soon as I got out of college in 2006. So it's been about 15 years doing that. So that's all I do all day, every day is manage SEO accounts for various clients in different industries, mostly e-commerce, healthcare, legal. You know, I have a few niches that I stick to, but yeah, so that's my journey, and that's pretty much all I do.
Well, then you are just a perfect person to have on this panel today, Jesse. So thank you for joining us. Jesse is also a vice president at the American Marketing Association's Pittsburgh chapter. And finally, we have Mackenzie Ferrone, who is the Senior Manager of Communications for Griner Bio One. She is also part of the American Marketing Association's board as a vice president. So Mackenzie, can you tell us a little bit about your current role and your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. And I'm thrilled to be here today and talk to some of you about SEO and its ins and outs. So I have 10 years of experience in marketing. I'm actually a alumna of Point Park University and their international business program. So I have a bachelor's and a master's in international business from Point Park. And I have 10 years of experience in both traditional and digital marketing. So I'm a certified digital marketer and also have several different HubSpot certifications and social media advertising certifications. In my current role as the Senior Manager of Corporate Communications at Griner Bio One, I handle everything to do with our search engine optimization and PPC strategies, e-commerce, email marketing, and social media advertising in the branding and or biotech and healthcare sectors. And I also have a couple of freelance clients that I take on usually at a time, mostly small and medium sized, either women or minority owned businesses that are looking to build their digital brands as well. So at any point in time, I might be in a couple of different industries as well. So excited to talk to all of you today.
Fantastic. And thanks so much again for taking your time to join us. And it's exciting to have a Point Park alum on this panel. So as we get started, for those who are here in the audience, if you have any questions for our panelists, please put them into the chat and we will get to them as we can throughout our discussion today. And again, our focus is digital marketing and SEO. So I think a great place to start would be to look at digital marketing and what that encompasses. So Jamie, maybe you can start us out in helping our audience to understand the breadth of digital marketing.
Yeah, sure. So obviously marketing is a very broad subject. I mean, you can go anywhere from print, but we're focused more on the digital side, right? So that's looking at what you do in social, what you do in advertising, SEO. You know, at Butler Technologies, we mainly focus on the digital side of the marketing equation. And I know, I think Mackenzie will be able to really add some value to the pieces in digital marketing, but she heads up our digital marketing department for the AMA.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really great. And I actually had a conversation about this today in a meeting this afternoon with an intern that we had brought on, explaining what digital marketing really was. And at the end of the day, it's really using different digital marketing or technological softwares and assets to be able to reach the customers where they are online. And that doesn't just necessarily mean SEO, although it's a huge part of it. It could mean everything from your email marketing and automations, your social media, organic postings and advertising platforms that you have. It could be your AdWords campaigns and what keywords are you looking after. It's your backlinking. So who else out there on the internet is talking about your company, your brand, your product, your business? So digital is really turned into its own beast. And I'm sure Jesse can talk, he's been in this longer than I, about the long, illustrious history of how the importance of digital marketing has grown. But I think that, I don't want to speak for the other panelists, but I think we can all agree that even small businesses at this point, from small to large, if you don't have a robust digital marketing strategy that includes all of those different aspects, social, email, SEO, PPC, e-commerce, all of those different arms, then you're really behind the times at this point. Would you agree, Jesse?
Yeah, and it's really come a long way. 20 years ago when I first got into this, it was only big businesses that were really paying attention and doing these types of things. And watched it evolve over the years, and now you can just be an artist, or you make music, or maybe you just want to promote yourself because you're trying to get hired right out of college. There's some reputation management, right? There's so many different ways that you can use digital marketing and specifically SEO to just promote yourself. So it's not really about big business as it was, a couple decades ago. It's really a set of skills that anybody can use to promote themselves or their business or their passion project.
I think that's something important for us to come back to, the fact that anybody who is in the audience listening today could be using digital marketing tools for marketing themselves. But one of the things, Jesse, that I want to make sure the audience really understands is what SEO is. So can you kind of describe that more specifically?
Yeah, SEO is what we talk about as the organic side of search. So when you do a search in Google, you're going to see the paid ads, which are usually the first 3 and the bottom 3. And then the top 10 that nobody pays for, they're just there. Those are organic search results. So SEO is optimizing a website to rank there naturally. And why it's important is, if you want to rank for a specific keyword or set of keywords, if you want to just pay to get there overnight, you're chained to that budget forever, right? It costs a lot of money. It's very expensive. But with SEO, you can learn how to optimize your site to rank naturally. And over time, you get hundreds or thousands of keywords built up that you're driving more and more traffic to your site naturally. And there's off-page SEO and there's on-page SEO. And those are some of the things we're going to get into in detail tonight, is what the difference is between off-page and on-page and why backlinks are important. But in general, it's how to optimize your website so that search engines push you higher in the results.
Thanks so much, Jesse, for explaining that in a little more detail. And as we're thinking about that, and for those in the audience who are listening, one thing we'd ask is for you to keep yourself muted, at least at this point while we're having the panel discussion. But if you have some specific questions, put them in the chat and we can certainly have you ask those questions as well. Oh, and the other thing I should mention in terms of record keeping is we are recording tonight's session. So you will be able to go back and listen and hear more about and increase your knowledge in that way. Repetition helps. We know that as marketers, right?
Definitely.
So I want to go back to something that Mackenzie said a little bit earlier. She mentioned that digital marketing is really important for any organization, regardless of size, regardless of category, regardless of industry. So let's talk for a moment then about that idea of value. How does digital marketing, how does SEO create value for an organization?
That's a really great question. And I think one of the big things that it does, and I guess this is probably something that's up for debate, but I think one of the things that it really does is it has the ability to level the playing field. So like Jesse mentioned, there are huge companies out there that have millions of dollars of revenue coming in every year who have horrible websites and their search engine optimization is awful. And what it allows people to be able to do is take that medium or small size business that doesn't have the money to put into, say, huge advertising campaigns and huge branding campaigns and billboards and all of this other stuff. They can pour that money into digital marketing strategies or specifically SEO. And if they're smart enough to understand innately where their customers are going to be searching and what their customers are going to be searching for when they have the intention of finding their product, then they can compete at that higher level with these much larger brands, which, 10 years ago was just simply not possible. It's also, I think, very unique in that let's say if a medium-sized business or a small business and a large business both wanted to put an ad in a magazine, it's going to cost the same no matter how much they have, right? No matter how much revenue they're bringing in. When you're looking at SEO, a lot of that work, if you have somebody that's knowledgeable, doesn't cost much to do. And if we're talking about adding on something like a pay-per-click campaign or an AdWords campaign, so like Jesse was talking about, if you want to rank quickly and get up in the top 4 spots in the search results, you can really look at that and say, well, it's a bidding system. What keywords are going to work the best for me? Where do I think I'm going to get the largest return for my money? I've only got this small pocket of amount to spend. So I think that it also offers the value of being very flexible and nimble and allowing people that would not have been able to market themselves as effectively even a decade ago to be able to come in and compete in spaces where they couldn't previously.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that's really important for the audience to recognize, is that it really gives the ability for almost anybody to market themselves differently and with much higher effectiveness. And Jamie, I think in your role overseeing the marketing and sales efforts for your organization, what are you seeing is particularly important and valuable?
Well, I wanted to add on to what Mackenzie was saying about large companies and small companies being on a level playing field, and that's absolutely true. When you're talking about SEO, you want to try, for example, for my company, if I want to rank for something, right, we would write content around that, whether it's an article, a blog, having a nice page written, and that content gets ranked on Google, right? And so when you dedicate your efforts into the SEO side, that return that you get on that investment stays there. So for example, if I'm running an ad versus writing a blog, and I get the ad showing up on top 3 in the top of the ads. Like if you look at a Google page, you see the ads first, then you see the organic listings underneath. And so if I invest in the SEO side and that's showing up organically, it's shown that consumers are 80% more likely to click on the native organic ad because they trust that, right? That's somebody that's put in effort. So from our side, we're looking to create valuable content that our consumers are going to want to read, they're going to want to consume. And that allows us to stay evergreen, because when we take that ad money away, it's gone. You don't show up anymore, but yet the SEO will stay there when you're done. So that's kind of where our focus is right now, is growing the SEO of our company.
Well, and let's look at that then a little more depth, that SEO piece in ranking engines. That an organization can go about getting better rankings organically. What are some of the tools that are necessary, or some of the techniques to be able to be utilized?
So some of the things that we do is we take a look at competitive searches. So for example, we have a keyword that we shoot for, right? So let's call it in-mold electronics. What I would do is I would type that into Google and I would see what starts to pop up in the landscape, what ads are being shown, what search results are being shown. And so we take a look at those top 3 and say, what did they write about? What kind of content do they have? Are there good graphics? Is it good information? And so if we want to rank for that specific keyword, we will this is made famous by Neil Patel, but we call it a skyscraper. So they've built these buildings that are this tall. We want to build ours just a little bit better so that we show up in the rankings ahead of them. And so that's kind of the technique we use when we want to learn, or when we want to rank for a specific keyword.
So there's that important.
Too, if I can add to what Jamie mentioned, when we're talking about, I think it's specifically important for this group as well. We've talked about in the past, it was really the companies that had the most money that got the most attention, right? If you could spend the most money on advertising and branding, you're the ones that won the customers. Right now, when it comes to digital marketing and SEO specifically, it's not about money. It's not about who has the most money necessarily. It's about who has the most knowledge. So to Jamie's point, if you have somebody in your smaller or medium-sized company that has a really strong understanding of SEO, a very strong understanding of keyword research and what their customers are going to be looking for, what that customer behavior is, they're going to be able to knock somebody out every time who doesn't, because they're going to write content that is not only interesting and applicable to the customers that they're trying to reach, but that's also keyword dense and is going to rank more easily or grow in the ranks faster because of the engagement that it's seeing. I know, Jamie, sounds like you take a very organic approach to your keyword research. For me, and maybe I cheat a little bit, and Jesse, I don't know if you use the same softwares. I'd be interested to know what you use as well. But I usually use softwares like SEMrush or Ahrefs, or there's a couple of different ones out there where it's a tool where you can actually say, here's 10 keywords that I've done some research on. I think that's probably what people are searching for when they're looking to come buy my product or find my service, find my artwork, whatever. And it will actually give you data on what those searches are. How many people are searching per month? How many other companies are trying to rank for that search number, or are they bidding on it in the search results and the ads area? What's the difficulty of you also trying to rank for that keyword, or does somebody pretty much have a lock on it? And you can really manipulate what your plan looks like and make it as efficient as possible. The low-hanging fruit when you're looking for this information and using this data is to try to find the keywords that have a lot of search volume. A lot of people are Googling that per month, but not a lot of people are ranking with really good search results, or nobody's necessarily running an ad on that keyword. That's really low-hanging fruit where your budget stretches a lot. And softwares like I mentioned, like Ahrefs and SEMrush, can really easily aggregate and provide that information for you. But Jesse,
yeah,
what do you usually?
No, that's a good point. I use the big 3 that I would recommend to people are SEMrush, which is SEMrush, Moz, which is MOZ, and then Ahrefs. Those are the top 3. And to Mackenzie's point, there's a lot of people that make mistakes with what they want to rank for. Some people will just say, oh, well, I want to rank for this. A client will come to me and say, I want to rank for XYZ term. And they don't realize that no one's even searching for that. So that's the biggest mistake people make, is they'll put time and effort and content and links and all this stuff into a term that there's hardly any volume for, right? So you want to look at who's the top competitors in my space and what are they ranking for, and how hard is it going to be for me to also rank for those. And then going back to Jamie's point with the competitive analysis, another thing you need to look at when you're doing a competitive analysis are some of the key SEO metrics. First one would be domain authority, right? Domain authority is a rating from 0 to 100. So for example, a new site you just registered today would be a 0. Sites like Wikipedia, Facebook, Amazon, those are the 99s of the world. So, a well-optimized corporate site or personal site that you've had for a long time will fall somewhere in the middle, right? So domain authority is a big metric. Backlinks, which we'll talk about further in a minute, referring domains. These are things that you need to look at to kind of get an idea of, should I go after these terms? Are they super competitive? If I am going to go after them, how much content am I going to need? How many links am I going to need? What's the keyword density of the sites that are ranking in this space? And a lot of those tools that, Mackenzie just mentioned are good for narrowing those things down.
Yeah, and Jesse, one of the things that I see people do a lot, which usually as a digital marketer, and I don't know, Jamie and Jesse, if you do as well, but it makes me cringe every time I hear somebody say this. But it's a logical thing to think until you explain it to someone, is that there is also a difference between the number of search results that come up for a query and the number of people searching for a query. So a lot of people will say, well, I want to know how many people are searching pizza shops in my area. And they'll go into Google and they'll type pizza shops in my area, and they'll look at it and say, oh, Google has 4.5 million results. Yeah. That means 4.5 million people are searching for this. Yeah. And it's not, it just means that's how many results Google pulls up. What we're talking about here is the number of physical people who are going into a search engine and typing that particular query word for word or broad match into the search engine to try to find a product or service. And I'm always surprised by the number of people that misinterpret that. But then when you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, until somebody explains it to you, that's a little bit difficult to wrap your head around sometimes. Yeah, and looking at those volume numbers is another big question that comes up when you're talking about doing a digital marketing campaign and looking at keywords are, does it make more sense to do SEO or pay-per-click, right? Those are the only two ways you're going to get on Google, one or the other, SEO or pay-per-click. What makes the most sense? You have to look at those volume numbers, because if it's going to take you months of time and effort to try to rank for a term that gets searched 5 times a month, you might as well just bid on it and buy it, right? But if it's a term that gets searched 100,000 times a month, can you imagine what your budget's going to be if you buy that term? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. You might as well gear towards the SEO side.
The other piece of it.
Oh, sorry, go ahead,
Mackenzie.
I was just going to add, because I wrote this down and that was the perfect segue, Jesse, is to also, when you're doing this SEO work, especially if you're talking about not doing SEO, but doing pay-per-click campaigns, you're looking for those keywords. I always tell people, be logical about where you can fit and what your budget allows you to do. Don't compete where you never can. I had to have this conversation with my boss just a couple weeks ago, because we're in healthcare and biotech, and obviously with COVID, there's a lot of stuff going on and there's a lot of searches for our products. And I got an email from him one day asking, well, Mackenzie, I'm searching, COVID testing products and I'm not, or COVID testing, and we're not ranking in the top 4. And I had to explain to him, there is never a chance ever, now or in the future, where we will ever outrank the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, these organizations and these websites that are not even just favored by Google because of their importance of information, but also, just to your point, Jesse, the domain authority of those sites is not going to be beatable by a mid-sized medical device manufacturer. So
these are all reasons that the competitive analysis is the first thing you should do. The first thing you should do is look at who's ranking. Can I beat them? Does it make sense?
Yes.
Now, a question, we're getting a number of questions in. So this discussion is definitely provoking some interest in our audience. So thinking about that competitive analysis, one of the questions we got was, how often should a company be checking, comparing, and maybe even changing their keywords?
Frequently. So yeah, anything that we want to rank for, we always monitor and make sure that that's constantly being, looked at. If we need to add keywords or change keywords. So for example, if we were, here's an example, you also want to pay attention to search intent. So you don't want somebody just looking for something that's informative, right? Your goal is to be in front of a customer when they need something. So somebody wants to buy. We always say, let's look for buying intent, right? So if we've got a keyword, for example, if I've got a membrane switch I'm trying to sell, and somebody's asking the question, what is a membrane switch? It may be a student, maybe somebody researching, they're just trying to get information. But if somebody's searching for, where can I find a membrane switch manufacturer? I want to make sure I'm showing up there, right? So we're constantly making sure that those keywords that we're punching into our content is relevant.
And this role in an organization, reviewing competitors' work and doing this analysis, looking at these keywords, is there a particular position for this within an organization?
Yeah, it's a digital marketer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of names. I mean, it's really
SEO
dependent.
analyst.
Yeah, SEO specialist, SEO analyst, digital marketer. Mine's under corporate communications. It can really be anything. I think, especially because this type of work, in the grand scheme of the history of the workforce, is very new as it goes. And so, companies are still trying to figure out where that niche is, and some companies are still trying to figure out that they need it. They're trying to rely on, antiquated ways of doing things and wondering why it's not working. And I think it's the same with social media as well. Jesse and Jamie, I don't know how you feel, but even the smallest companies are expected to have social media presences now, and not only just have a presence, but have a presence that is optimized and utilized. And it's not just enough to put information out to your customers. You have to engage them. You have to be doing live chats and events and webinars. To Jamie's point, content. They always talk about content is king, video is king. And it's true, but it also causes, there to be, in the same way with SEO, a lot of competition. And so you need to understand innately how these digital technologies work if you're going to leverage them properly.
Well, that's a great segue into another question then, since you've mentioned content, Mackenzie. Let's talk about the role that content plays in SEO. For instance, blogging and other forms of content that may be added regularly or irregularly. How does that fit into SEO?
Yeah, I'll tackle that one. It actually kind of, it has to do with the previous question as well. When someone mentioned, I think Chris mentioned, how often should you change keywords, right? That made me think of something, because you don't really want to change the keywords on your page. You want to add new pages all the time. Constantly adding content is the key to SEO, this decade. A long time ago, it was more on keywords and you can manipulate things, but now Google just wants to see more content. And they also want to see that you have fresh content all the time. So if you have a page, let's say your homepage is always going to be the strongest ranking page. Once you rank for something, you don't really want to change that. You just want to add another page. And so anytime that you're researching, you're thinking, oh, this would be a good keyword for me to go after. This would be a great keyword. You don't want to change what you're already working on. You want to add more pages. Right.
Thanks for the clarification, Jesse. Yes.
Yeah. So if you rank for the word law firm, and and that's what you've worked on for years, and you're like, okay, well now we have a specialty in immigration law. You don't want to change your keywords of your homepage. You want to add /immigration and build on that, right? And so that's where kind of blogging ties into this. Is if you can go after what's called long tail keywords, which are things that maybe you don't want to dedicate your homepage or some of your main pages to, but by blogging once a week, twice a week, you can add hundreds of long tail keywords, which are small keywords that may not be something you'd want to dedicate a major page to, But over time, when you're consistently blogging, these add up to large traffic amounts. And then the other benefit is Google sees that content is constantly fresh. So when Google, another thing that's important is indexing speed or cache rate. And this is Google's, how often they read your site and index it and come back. So if you're a brand new site, Google might come crawl your page once every 2 weeks, right? But when you're a newspaper that's publishing content on the fly, they're pinging your site every hour. And that's where you want to get to. You want to get to the point where Google says, this site is pushing out great content all the time, so we're going to pay close attention to it. And every time you publish something, they're right on it and they're indexing it. And the easiest way to do that is to have consistent blogging and show them that you're always on top of it and you're always pushing out industry related content.
You're exactly right. And it just with blogging, it's kind of funny that it's always kind of had a bad connotation. Everybody thinks about like the person that's just blogging back in the early 2000s just for fun. But now it's actually a business strategy that you need to implement. It's about providing that content. You know, I was just thinking back to the question we had about positions within a company, and we have two within our company that are helping to manage that whole content cycle. So we have one that's focused on the content, and then the other one that's focused on the analytics. So one pushes out content, the other one reviews the way that's been, the results of it. And they constantly work in this symbiotic relationship, and that content then trickles down into the social, like Mackenzie had said. But blogging is definitely something that's very important nowadays, and a lot of companies have implemented.
Yeah, and I think I would just round that out by saying as well, you know, I think that for people who aren't super familiar with SEO at this point, one of the things to always remember, especially when you're writing content like a blog, is to remember that you are writing for two audiences. You're writing for your consumer. So it should be something that is engaging and important, and most hopefully will hit a pain point that they're having. It will answer a question that they have, or be an interesting nugget of information for them. And the second is Google. You always need to think about, how am I able to write this content for both my customer or the consumer that I want to attract and Google, because Google's what's going to put it in front of them. And that really is an art. So to your point, Jamie, like when you're talking about what are the different positions inside an organization that does this, it's not just anyone that can be a copywriter. It's not just anybody that can write for SEO, because you have to toe that line, walk that tightrope of, I'm writing something that reads well and is engaging for a human being, but I'm also writing something that needs to be crawled correctly in the way I intend by Google.
Well, and we're still getting some questions about keywords. I think that explanation of content helps to maybe solidify in our audience's mind the importance of having, especially that regularity of content trickling. But there are still some questions about keywords. So maybe you could take a moment to just briefly talk a bit about the bidding process relative to keywords. And then also another question that came in, if you're maximizing the amount of keywords associated with an organization, will you likely then see that help you get a top search rank?
So I'll address Emma's question about maximizing the keywords. It's kind of goes back to what I was talking about adding more pages, right? You only have so much room per page. And let's start with the most important meta tag, which is the title. You only have about 65 characters to work with. That's it. So when you're looking at a page and you say, okay, what do I want to optimize this for? You have about 65 characters to do it in. Outside of that, you got to move on to your next page, right? So you're optimizing something for, let's use my law firm example again, right? Pittsburgh law firm - Pittsburgh immigration law. That's about, you know, what you're getting out of that page. So then if you want to rank for all the other types of law that your organization goes after, you know, divorce attorney, bankruptcy, you have to make more pages for that. So a lot of people think they just pack every keyword possible onto a page, and the more the better. That's not the angle. You want to use your site in a way that you're creating new content pages and make sure each of those pages is as focused as it can be on a certain set of keywords.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would add to that as well, because this is a mistake that people make a lot of times too, is they do the right thing where they have a landing page that's focused on one keyword, one long tail keyword, let's say, for example, and they put it in there 30 times because they think the more number of times I get that keyword on this page, the better it is. And the truth of the matter is, 20 years ago, yeah, I forget what they call it, Jesse, for Jamie, if you remember the word, it was like keyword
stuffing. You would call it keyword stuffing, where people but nowadays that's considered spamming, and you're going to get penalized for that. And that's what's called keyword density. She mentioned it earlier, Mackenzie did, called keyword density. And it's kind of different based on industry. But in general, you only want to be around 1 to 3% keyword density. You want it to be natural. You want the term or the phrase used in the title tag, the description, in image alt text, but then again, once you're into the real content, you want to use synonyms, you want to use content that's similar to it, but you don't just want to repeat those words over and over, or that can have a negative effect.
Well, you mentioned alt tags and images. So why don't we talk about that for a moment? So what role do images play, and how do alt tags affect images when we're talking about SEO?
Yeah, images are extremely important. Not only because Google will look at the image and the alt text of the image to attribute to the success of it organically, the page itself, but then there's image search results too, right? So if you're selling a product, you want to be in the image search results, you want to be in the shopping, you want to be in the organic, and the meta information of that image is important. So not only the alt text, but you have a caption, you have the name of the image itself. So if you're selling a microwave and you have a picture of that microwave, instead of just having it 123.jpg with blank information in it, make it microwave.jpg and then say best microwave in the alt text, or what have you, because that shows Google, okay, the image is related to the keyword, the alt text is explaining the keyword, and then you can write a little caption as well. Another reason images are important to have on pages, especially like when you're blogging, right? If you're writing a blog and you just have content, text only content, versus if you have images, infographics, video, it helps people stay on the page longer. And that's something I wanted to go into just briefly in terms of how you can optimize a page. Even if you're perfectly optimized and you're getting good results and people are clicking through, if your users aren't engaged with the page once they get there, you can lose that ranking just because of that. You don't want people clicking on the page and then hitting the back button immediately, because over time, Google's algorithm will look at that and say, hey, we thought this page was valid and should rank here, but users are telling us another story, and you will see that ranking drop. So you want to get time on site as high as possible. So using images, videos, infographics, any form of rich media to keep people on the page longer and lower your bounce rate will not only help the user experience and lead to more conversions or whatever action you're trying to get them to take, but Google's algorithm is looking at that more and more every year as a signal to whether you really belong there or not.
Two quick additions to what you said there, Jesse. Number one, the bounce rate is something you need to pay attention to, right? If people, what they call bounce from your site, as soon as they get to there, you get lowered in your Google rankings. So you want to keep people on page longer. The other piece that's important about images is that 20% of your Google searches are done in image, not just your text searches. So you want your images also to rank.
So the images are important and they can affect the ranking as well.
Yes.
You also, both of you have mentioned links, and I think Mackenzie mentioned that as well. Can we talk a little bit about link building and why that's so important in SEO?
Sure, yeah, I can start us off on that. So there's a couple of different types of links. When we talk about links in regards to SEO as well, there's backlinking, there's internal links. When you're thinking about SEO from a perspective of building your website, again, you always want to think about it in terms of these two audiences. You want to think about it in terms that it's set up in a manner that makes it very clear cut where Google is supposed to crawl, where you want it to go, what words do you want it to see, what images, but also you want it to be a clear navigation for your customer as well. And one of the ways that you can do that throughout the site, aside from having, you know, intuitive navigation, is to include internal links on pages. Normally what we do, what I encourage clients to do, and what I do in the company that I work for, is I always map out all of my different customer flows. So if I have someone, let's say I'm running a new social media ad, before I put anything into place, before I put any budget behind it and start spending money, I will map out, here's the audience that I have, here's the message that I have, and here's the goal where I want them to be, and map out the steps from they came to my social media ad and filled out a lead form, and then they come through these steps to go on my website from this page to this page to this page, and they end up making a purchase. Some of that can include internal links. So at a page that you have, like to Jesse's point, if that particular page that they go to doesn't have the information that they were hoping to find or doesn't answer their question, you don't want them to just exit the page. You want them to continue on in your site, try to find that information or another piece or product that they're looking for. So you can add an internal link there that's a hyperlink. It's a call to action of some kind that might cause them to reach the next page, or a different page with additional information on a subject that they're interested in. And that looks good to both your user and to Google, because Google will follow those internal links as well. And if they're logical and if they make sense, and if the people on your website follow those different internal links as well as they kind of go around from page to page, that's a really well-functioning, well-oiled machine of a website. There's also something, and I know Jesse wanted to elaborate on this as well, called backlinks. And backlinks are important as well to raise your reputation, basically, with Google. So every site, like Jesse mentioned earlier, is given a score, basically, of how effective of a website are they and how much are people using it efficiently and effectively. So when you tie your site to other sites that have very high brand identities and domain authority scores, that tells Google, like, oh, well, your site must be really reputable and have really good information because this other page with a very reputable score is tying to yours. And they wouldn't do that unless they believe that you were reputable as well. So to go back to my example from a couple minutes ago, if my company is a healthcare company and we publish a blog or work together on a dual published article with the National Institutes of Health, and the National Institutes of Health posts that on their website with a link back to a similar article or our landing page or homepage, that's going to help us because obviously the NIH is a very well-respected domain authority score. So, you know, there's a couple of different links that you need to worry about, and they are important for different reasons.
Yeah, you really need to think about backlinks as a vote, right? At the end of the day, because we talked already about the on-page optimization, right? So keyword density, selecting your keywords, writing your content, alt tags, everything we mentioned is meaningless when you're dealing with a high competitive keyword and you don't have any backlinks, right? So if you search for something that has any level of competition these days whatsoever, you're going to see there's 4 million results for this keyword. Well, that means all 4 million are somewhat optimized for this keyword, right? So you're not going to get a single click if you're not in the top 10. How do you get in that top 10 if the first 500 are all perfectly optimized? Backlinks is the answer, right? And so when you're looking at a competitive analysis, and what we talked about earlier, domain authority, number of backlinks, referring domains. Referring domains is a link from an individual domain, right? So if you have 10 referring domains and each one of those links to you 10 times, you're gonna have 100 backlinks, right? But it's important to get them from individual domains because Google sees those as votes. And they're gonna say, okay, this site is about this subject. It's well optimized, we know that. It has 100 different sites linking to it that use that word versus this next site only has 10. We're going to rank this much higher because it has more backlinks. And another thing that's important is anchor text. It's very important in the backlink, but it's also important for what Mackenzie mentioned of even internal linking. Google likes to see that the link itself, the hyperlinked part, mentions the keywords in it. So if it's just a link that says click here versus a link that says law firm, you're going to get a lot more value out of the one that has your keyword in it. And so that's called anchor text. So the more links you could get from various domains using that anchor text, that's really what you're looking for in an off-page, off-site SEO campaign. And it's even better if it's attached to similar content. So if you're getting a link from some random social media site versus you're getting a link from someone that's in your industry that writes an article about your specialty, that's going to be a better link as well. So context, domain authority, anchor text, that's what you're looking for in backlinks.
Now with these backlinks, it sounds like they're really important in SEO. So one of the questions that came into the chat, how do you get companies to add backlinks to your site?
I could
on their own site.
Yeah, so one strategy you can do is what's called guest blogging. So in other words, you can post or have one of your marketers post on another company's website, write a blog for them, and in exchange, a lot of these companies will allow you to backlink to your own website. So if it's the author and the author's bio and who they work for, and that creates a backlink. Another way to do it would be to work on some type of conjunctive article together in which another company is writing about your company on their website. Mackenzie had mentioned how important it was to gather backlinks, and little story, a little color for that. Back in 2018, we worked on the Olympic jackets with Ralph Lauren and DuPont. Well, when that announcement went out, you can imagine what the domain authority was of those two websites, both calling out our company. Our domain score and the backlinks, our rankings went up simply because of that collaboration we had with those other companies. So not being in a silo and making sure that your company is relevant with other companies is one way to gather some backlinks.
Yeah, also just creating great content.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say, Jesse. I was like, just write some really good content and you'd be surprised how much it happens on its own. Because I was thinking that when you were talking earlier, I was like, oh, well, Jesse just described how something goes viral.
Yeah, really great content. Lists are great. When you see a great piece of content about a certain industry and it's like top 10 ways to make this happen, or especially infographics, right? It's called link bait or link baiting is the term. And it's, creating a piece of content specifically to make everybody that's blogging about that industry reference it. That's a great way to do it for free. And so far, we've only talked about free methods. Once you get to the agency level, I know that's something we were going to discuss later, agency versus, doing something for a company. Once you get to an agency level, a lot of it is paid also. When you get to very high competition things, it's kind of becomes a pay to play industry when you get highly competitive with it. Things like Google News, right? If you get a journalist to write an article that goes in a Google News feed, one of the most powerful links you can get. So not all links are created equal, but as long as you can keep them contextual and have good anchor text and, you get them naturally, there's no such thing as a bad link, if you follow those parameters.
Yeah, you can syndicate articles as well. So like Jesse, like you had said, you can pay like an AP Newswire to pick up your articles or your blogs and syndicate it. And then what they do is they push it out to various news sources.
Yeah, we actually, so one of my clients is just here in Mount Lebanon. They're a women-owned virtual childcare business. And they just had that happen last month. They wrote a blog. It really hit home for people. It started getting shared. And then within 48 hours, it was on Good Morning America, Yahoo News, Bloomberg, NPR. Wow. I mean, this little, literally working out of her home mom entrepreneur wrote a blog, and it ended up giving us, it was 5,000 a day additional hits to their website because it got picked up and went viral.
That's really impressive. So it sounds like that, you know, the blogging piece can have multiple layers of benefit when we're thinking about SEO. And one thing I do want to go back to was, I mentioned this earlier, but I don't think we really discussed it yet, is keyword bidding. Because, you know, the blog, we can do some things to help to get the blog out there and help to add to the backlinks and increase our search rankings. But there are, you know, we are going to be buying keywords and bidding on keywords. So how does that process, just briefly, how does that work? What should people know when they're engaging in that?
Yeah, so bidding can be a complicated beast in the beginning if you've never done it before. I will say that once you get the hang of it, a lot of digital marketing tools seem to use very similar systems. So when we're talking about bidding for keywords, we're specifically talking about doing pay-per-click. Some people call it AdWords, but it's like Jesse mentioned at the very beginning. You usually use it in situations where you know there's no way that you're going to rank organically, or it's going to take you a really long time and there's a lot of competition for words that are going to rank organically for you in search results. And so you're just willing to pay per click to get your search result in the top of this Google search result pages. Normally there's 4 spots at the top of keyword search results on a page, and you can tell because they usually have the little ad rectangle on them, so you can tell that they're an ad and not organic. And it is done through a bidding system. So you can go in and see, for the keyword that I want to rank for, again, everything starts with keyword research. So you go in and say, this is the keyword I want to rank for, to use Jesse's example, immigration law firms. I don't think I can rank for that organically, so I'm going to pay for that keyword. I would go in and look and set up an ad in AdWords, and it would tell me, okay, you've got a lot of competition for this keyword. The person who, or the 4 companies that are winning this bidding war right now are paying anywhere between $12.85 a click and $16.75 a click. So you know, if you want to compete for that keyword getting in there, you have to outbid at least the lowest bidder, right? If you want to try to outbid the highest ranked person, you can. And the nice thing about the way that they're set up, and again, this kind of goes back to that leveling the playing field kind of discussion we had at the beginning, was that if the highest bid, let's say, for a keyword is $20, a company can come in and bid $100. Doesn't matter. They are only going to get charged by Google $20.01. They're only going to charge enough just so you can outrank a bidder. And that person can look at their keywords like we had earlier in the conversation. How often do you look at these? These people can go back in and say, uh-oh, we've fallen because somebody is outbidding us. I'm going to bid $20.02. And you go back and forth for these different keywords and continue to bid and see kind of who wins out in this auction, basically, is what it is. But it's nice because they do have safeguards in place that kind of keep anyone from being able to come in and say, you know what, I'm just bidding $1,000 for every click on this keyword because I got $1 billion. So I'm going to get all the search results. It doesn't allow for that. And usually, you know, Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter have ad platforms that are set up in a similar manner. They're usually auction bidding systems as well.
And when you talk about Google specifically, you know, like with this, we're mostly talking about, you know, Google organic, but, you know, when you're talking about pay-per-click within Google, they also have a quality score, right? Which is another layer of leveling the playing field. So if somebody comes in, like Mackenzie says, and they have $1 billion, and they're like, okay, you know, we just want to throw money at this and be number one all the time. Even if a smaller company is bidding less, if their content is better, their bounce rate is lower. See, all these things are starting to come together now. If your bounce rate is lower, your time on site is better, people engage with it more, Google will say, hey, we're going to allow this company to be in the top 3, even if they're not the highest paying, because people interact with it at a much higher level, right? So there's things like that that also level the playing field. So it's not strictly the people with the most money always win. You know, you have to have a well-balanced site that keeps people engaged and has a low bounce rate.
Well, that's good to know. So it's not always all about the money. I think that's a good place for us to start to wrap up our session this evening. We could continue to talk about this probably for several more hours, but what I'll suggest for our audience is that they register to attend the AMA Pittsburgh's SEO Bootcamp with Jesse in May, and that would be a great way to get even more information. So as we wrap up, just want to ask our panelists one final thought. What should our audience members remember about digital marketing and SEO? Jesse, we'll start with you.
Well, I would just say, you know, content is king, right? You always want to be pushing out content, whether it's blogging or guest blogging to get link building. Everything comes down to content and making sure you're producing high quality content to both get backlinks and show Google that you're always staying relevant. So just make sure your content is on point, and everything else will follow. And
Mackenzie, what would you share?
Yeah, I would share, I know we talked a lot about search engine optimization and some AdWords stuff here, but keep in mind that a digital marketing strategy is that, but it's also much, much more. So always keep in mind those two audiences that you are writing for, Google and your consumer. So you've done the ad, you've done the SEO work, you've gotten people to your site, you have that contact. Now you have to think, what am I going to do with that contact? Am I going to email them? Am I going to ask them to connect to my social media accounts? Once I do that, what do I want them to see? Where do I want to navigate them to? So remember that SEO is extremely important, but it's one pillar of a much larger, more robust digital marketing strategy.
So Jesse reminded us that content is king. Mackenzie is reminding us that we have not just our own consumer audience, but we have Google as our other audience. Jamie, the last word goes to you.
Sure, thank you. I just wanted to let everyone know, I know there's plenty of collegiate students on the line here tonight. Marketing is fun, in my opinion. It is such a creative outlet. Like I said, I came from an engineering background where it's very regimented and very logical. But marketing was so great that it works both sides of the brain. You get to be creative and think about your end customer and the consumer and how to reach them and what their needs are. And you also have that analytical side. So if you're in marketing now, graduating, there's many different paths between content, between analytics, between public relations. Find the path that suits you and follow it.
All right, find your path. That's a great message for students. And with that, we will wrap up today's session. I want to again thank our panelists, Jamie Orlando, Jesse Witham, and Mackenzie Ferrone. And behind the scenes, I also would like to thank Nan Nichols and Lauren Norris for assisting from the AMA Pittsburgh. Thanks to all of the AMA Collegiate Chapter schools with both their advisors and their students who joined us, and others who just maybe have a passion, or maybe this lit a passion for marketing under you and you're going to continue to explore and advance your knowledge. We're so glad that you joined us today. So on behalf of the AMA Pittsburgh and the Roland School of Business, thank you once again. And don't forget, we have 2 more of these exciting collegiate conversations coming up. Make sure you go to www.amapittsburgh.org and get registered. Thanks, everyone.